Global, sparking innovative thoughts. Hello, welcome to a special session of Techsauce Global Podcast. I'm Choa Datjong Nona Pupe, the Techsauce Global Content Editor. Today, we're going to take a look at the educational system in the world right now, as we have gone through a whole year of change and disruption in various sectors. Education has definitely been one of them. And with COVID-19 still one of the biggest issues that we'll have to deal with for 2021, we'll take a look at what lessons we've learned in 2020 and how we can move forward for the future of education here. And we are very lucky indeed, because we have with us someone that has actually been at Techsauce Global Summit. And
Yes.
She's well known as well here in Thailand. And that is Dr. Linda Liukas from Finland. She is the author and illustrator of Hello Ruby, a children's picture book about the whimsical world of computers, as well as the founder of Rails Girls, a global movement to teach young women programming in over 260 cities. Hello.
Hi.
I have to say, you look so cute. If you, for our listeners, if you're just listening, you can't see the picture. Dr. Linda looks very good right now. Maybe because Zoom is doing very well for your skin.
Thank you. I think it's interesting. We've all learned to kind of look at one another through these rectangles and these screens. And this year has given us a peek into the everyday lives of one another. This, what you're seeing behind me is actually the favorite spot of my house. It's my bookshelf, and it was built just before the pandemic hit. So it's
right on
background
time.
I've been, yes,
actually,
background that I've been using a lot.
I mean, I just want to get out of the main topic. I mean, for a little bit, just to pivot a bit. I was actually watching a program the other day, how before you'd have a lot of book lovers, but then of course with the digital age, people didn't really look at books that often. But with Zoom, working from home happening so much now, there are reports that stores that have secondhand or really good, really great books are actually doing well because people want those books to be in their background.
There's this concept of anti-library, this idea that it's not that you need to read all the books out there. Sometimes the role of a book can also be that it holds a meaning, that a great book reminds you of an idea that you might have read already, but also an idea that you might still be able to discover in the future. So for instance, for me, I just love having books available. This is a book by about an artist called Robert Irvin, and just being able to see his name when I make my morning coffee or take a call kind of reminds me of some of the ideals he has. And there's this funny story about a French guy who had this beautiful big library. And his visitors always would come to the library and say, "So have you read all the books you have over here?" And the French guy said, "No, but I haven't also drank all the wine in my wine cellar." So in some ways, I think it's a beautiful thing that books as objects of art and books as physical sort of reminders of big ideas we should be exploring are around here. And that's one of the reasons actually the Ruby books were physical books, because I think there is a lot of value in a very abstract, very a virtual world right now, is to hold something in your hands and say that, hey, this is something I can read, this is something I can touch, this is something that is finite.
Wow, I love that explanation. I meant it as a joke, but actually now I really need to get some books for my background. Yeah. I only have a wall. Okay. All right. So let's get to the main topic for today. COVID-19, it's impacted the education system here in Thailand and the rest of the world. How has it impacted Finland?
So for Finland, we've had it quite easy, to be honest. So our schools went into full lockdown only once last spring for roughly 2-3 months. But after that, school has actually returned to quite of like the new normal, basically. So our primary school students, they are in school in classes, and the secondary and upper secondary schools and universities have been remote since last fall. And I think there's, of course, been a lot of lessons learned. I don't teach students myself right now, so I haven't seen the classroom experience, but I did teach a class for university teachers this fall. So teachers who are training to become teachers, and we did it fully remote. And it was a very interesting experience in kind of this remote first pedagogy, and how do we create a sense of community and a sense of learning in an age where you only see these Zoom, these like square little boxes with your students. And I'm not speaking for the entire educational system, obviously, here, but I do feel that there was a lot of theater I actually ended up doing with my students. So we ended up doing kind of a blended model where I would send them in advance these videos they would watch. And then we would spend the classroom time discussing the videos, actually making crafts, making, for instance, when we were discussing data and algorithms, we were creating these face masks with the teachers. Each of the teachers also received in advance this little package with printed materials and craft materials and some tea to make them feel like homey. And then we also had a bunch of small sort of ideas to take them through this 10-week course, and creating that sense of anticipation, that's something where like you feel delighted, you feel that this is something extra, somehow someone has really thought about my experience. I think it made a huge difference. And I would send the teachers on adventures outdoors. I would ask them to take a walk in their neighborhood and spot things that belong to the internet. I would ask them to keep a log of websites or like content that they used on the internet and share with one another. And all in all, just try to create these moments of surprise throughout the experience of teaching, because I think every one of us is quite bored with just sitting in front of a Zoom and listening passively day in, day out.
It's so true. Actually, I didn't mention this at the beginning of our talk, but I haven't told you as well, but I'm a teacher as well.
Perfect.
I teach university and small kids. And I've actually, during here in Thailand, it was a different picture, I think, because we are in the second round of COVID-19. The first round, it happened, I think, mid-semester, and it was a really big disruption, definitely, because one week we were in class, the next week everyone was online, and so it depended really much on the teacher and in the individual who was in charge of their subject. And lucky for me, because of my media experience, I was kind of able to make it through.
Yeah. And I think that's a really, really important lesson also for all of the teachers who might be now listening, is that this was a crisis moment. This was not planned. This was not sort of practiced. And anyone who feels that last spring was like a handful, you're completely right. And I think the next time we're going to do anything equally like big in terms of like making a jump in digital pedagogy, it's just going to be much smaller and much more planned and much more incremental. So again, this was a crisis point, and everyone who just survived as a teacher this year, I think, deserves a huge kudos and a huge thank you. So don't feel bad if you didn't invent a whole new way of teaching overnight.
It was because you but definitely we're gonna have to get a lot of ideas from you. Definitely, I'm very interested in what you've talked about, how making it more interactive. And actually the second or the third time around of going to Zoom, even now, because we're experiencing the second round of the pandemic here in Thailand, we're finding new ways to deal with students, but at the same time it's so hard because it depends on your students, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because if they're really young, it's practically really difficult.
Impossible.
Impossible. Even if with university levels, if they're even in class, for those who are not really into it, right? The motivation, that has to go into it. It's
Yeah.
quite at large. Anyways, let's take a look at other countries then. We were talking about Finland, we were talking about Thailand. How about other countries? Have you any heard about how it's been for others?
So maybe a few words. So before the pandemic, I'm a children's book author and illustrator, but I did travel 180 days a year, just meeting with schools and educators and giving talks like the one I did in Bangkok in 2019. And obviously the pandemic switched all that overnight. So I haven't left Helsinki in a long time and probably won't leave in a while either. But I think the beautiful side of the pandemic has been that I've been able to visit classrooms in ways that were not possible before. So I've been to Italy, I've been to London, I've been to New York. And I think everywhere teachers are dealing with a very frustrating situation with very sort of novel and encouraging ways. And at some point when we realized that, oh no, that this pandemic is actually going to take a lot longer than the few weeks we were kind of mentally anticipating in the spring, we actually ended up with my team working on a bunch of these tiny videos called Computer Science in 60 Seconds. And the idea was that we would shoot these little whimsical, beautiful, funny videos that would last 60 seconds, that would always have me give a little explanation of the computer science topic. And these were intended for kids maybe in like first or second grade, so kids between 5 and maybe 8 or 9. And then there would always be some sort of an activity the kids could do, whether it was like dancing or making something out of Play-Doh or interviewing your grandparents over phone or just taking a walk around the neighborhood, and then coming back to the classroom setting and sharing with your other peers. Because as you mentioned, when you're very small and very curious about the world, it's impossible to sit down in front of a screen day for 8 or 9 hours a day. So I think teachers needed to kind of reinvent the pedagogics around screen time and figure out these ways where students could complete tasks on their own. And this is this has been really, really interesting to see from different cultures. How teachers have started to use these materials and kind of remix and reinvent them and come up with new ways of using them. And I think it's a little bit counter to the beliefs we have. But when we look at the history of education technology, well, there's first of all a long history of saying that all teaching is going to be remote and we won't be needing schools anymore. And now I think everyone can collectively say that, yes, we will need schools in the future as well. And people want to form communities and people want to learn in cohorts and communities together. But beyond that, when we look at education technology, there was the big era of these massive online courses, the MOOCs, and kind of the excitement around being able to study a Stanford course in Helsinki or in Bangkok. But then it kind of fizzled down and the excitement kind of disappeared a little bit. But I think the interesting thing here now with the new kind of what's going to happen in EdTech next is not the ability to kind of scale education, but actually to make it smaller. And really the role of a good teacher, I think, is something people have really started to value and recognize much more. And I predict that there's going to be a massive demand for great teachers. And with the kind of tools we're learning today to use when it comes to sort of Zoom first pedagogy and being able to reach students across the globe, like I've been doing this year, we will see all kinds of new business models and all kinds of new sort of brands and IPs coming up where you could be studying under dancing from a teacher in Bangkok or cooking from a teacher in New York. So there's going to be some sort of a blend, I think, between the kind of classroom of your local people, but I think it's too big of an opportunity to pass to be able to really learn from the best in the world when they are creating content out there. And that's something I'm really excited about when it comes to kind of what are the positive things that will come out of this pandemic year.
We were like fast forwarding all the way to what I was talking about. But okay, let's go back. I have one little, when we were talking, I'm really excited because of course I'm in education as well. One of the things that's interesting is you said I just want to ask, just out of my own curiosity, and maybe for others who are listening, when you're teaching young kids and you say that, you know, we want to make the experience better for them by challenging them to go outside, to do other things outside, how is the relationship then between the teacher and the parent going to be in the future? Because obviously parents throughout the whole world right now, they're complaining like, oh my gosh, you know, I have to help my kids do this, do that. Is it going to be changing that, you know, the relationship between the teacher, the school, and the parent, whereas maybe the parents or the family unit will have to play a bigger role in the education of their children or students?
And I think that is absolutely the kind of unpaid cost that we will get out of this pandemic, that we don't know yet what the cost for it will look like, because there has been so much talk, especially in Finland, about, because school is in some ways the great democratizer. Whatever your background is, especially like well-functioning public schools like we have in Finland, like whatever your background, whatever your family situation, like school is equally accessible and open to everyone, and kind of provides that equity in society. But now with the pandemic going, obviously, like the role of parents has been also really, really important in the spring. And the kids who come from great backgrounds and parents who put a lot of or can afford to invest in their children have a better position than the children who come from other kinds of backgrounds. And I think we won't see the effect of that until a few years in this kind of chaos and disrootedness or so that the children have experienced this spring. Positively thinking, I think like the role of parents is of course huge. Like it would be wrong to ask from society and teachers to educate and to raise our children. It's the job of the family to do that. And it's interesting to see that like more and more I've started to see, for instance, these virtual after schools, all kinds of like additional hobbies that parents are getting to their children and supporting them. And there used to be this big joke about how children's apps are not really a business, because you can't upsell to the children. You can't build like this $1 billion game company around content for children, which is great because we don't want to be doing that, and we want to sort of guard the children and so forth. But I think more and more parents are realizing that they want to pay for great digital experiences for their children that are safe and that are age appropriate, that promote the kinds of values and ideas that the parents want to be seeing. And it means good things for people who are working within children's content going forward.
Okay. And how do you think it's changed the classroom? Because here in Thailand, we have had different strategies done by different schools. Some schools have, 100% online learning. Other schools have some days in class, some days outside class. I have actually had to teach blended classes where that's the worst. Like it's the worst. I'm sorry, but it is just like you're teaching students in the class and online at the same time. In the handling of this whole crisis, what model do you think has been working well so far?
I think in handling the crisis, whatever works, and whatever gets us through the day, So I wouldn't kind of like look for best practices right now. I personally feel the same thing, that the blended model is the hardest one. But for some people, it works, and it provides an opportunity for the students to keep learning, even though they would be quarantined or working from home. I honestly don't think this is a good year to really build a future. We are in a crisis mode, and that's the thing that we need to figure out now. I think one of the kind of whimsical and the positive or optimistic ideas I've run into is this idea of a forest school. So it's a kindergarten model, very popular in Nordic countries, and I think it originates from Germany. But the idea is that there's a kindergarten class of students who actually don't even have a home base, so they don't have an indoors room at all. So what they do is they they build their little fortresses in the forest, and they use public spaces like libraries and so forth. And I would be curious to kind of study the forest schools of Finland a little bit closer and see the experiences they've had when they are not in crisis mode, when they've actually had the time to think this through. Because there was this study done where they said that like playing in the forest, it like within months, it changed the like gut biomes, so the microbes in the stomach of the children, because they would play in the mud and they would crawl around, and it made them healthier actually to be like eating and rolling and rummaging in the mud and the forest. And I think once we are past the biggest crisis, then it is the question when we start to think about like, okay, what does this mean for the classroom? Like, could the classroom actually be within public city space, or could it be in a central park, or do we actually need to be like having children sitting inside of a classroom that is badly ventilated, and in the worst case, they are sitting in the same room and everyone is looking at their own little tablet. So that doesn't seem very, I don't know, like very smart, but let's worry about all of that once the crisis is a little bit further along. I think everyone has so much on their plate right now that
okay, no, because I had to ask a question. Let's move on. Let's move on to a little bit of what you mentioned earlier on about the educational inequality and digital divide. I've already kind of myself experienced it a bit. Now, I'm not trying to talk only about myself, but I just want to share that I recently had to do, and because I was teaching at a public university, an online midterm. Wow. And we had problems. I mean, we tried to solve the problem as it came. Some students obviously may not have resources to have a laptop at home. Obviously, there was a need for a monitoring of another device while they were doing their work. While some students were worried about the internet connection, blackouts and everything. How are we learning from the situation? I mean, do you think COVID-19 is making it worse, or is it going to make it better in terms of, cutting that gap of, educational inequality and digital divide?
I think COVID-19 has definitely made infrastructure a hot topic again, and things like stable internet connection and fiber optic cables and like a fast internet connection have definitely become priorities for different cities and especially elsewhere as well. In Finland, actually, it's not the right word, but it's a human right. So every citizen is kind of like promised an access to high-speed internet. This was done already, I think, maybe even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So that has helped a lot. So even the rural areas, they get fast and stable internet. But I do think that especially going forward, those topics are going to be much more important. And then the question about like access and computers and just the like basic equipment needed to run a classroom in your home. I don't think we like knew half of it when we started. Like I think most kids probably didn't have a computer of their own, and now with the in some countries the lockdown has been going on for a year more or less. We are starting to realize that like this is probably going to be a future where all of us will have some sort of a personal computer from very small age onwards. I think one of the fascinating things for me has been the role of gaming and games in all of this, because when in March the lockdown started here in Helsinki, and I was in my tiny apartment, and I downloaded Fortnite for the first time. This like massive like player, this game, battle royale.
I've not played.
So me neither. And I just felt that I'm just going to kill a little bit of time while doing this, like waiting for the lockdown to lift. Then we thought optimistically that it's only going to be a few weeks. And the kind of killer thing for me, well, that's a wrong word. The best feature for me was the microphone, because in Fortnite you're playing in these little squads, in these little groups of people, and you have a headset on and you have the mic on, and all of a sudden I realized that I was talking nonstop with my friends who I was playing with, and hearing their voices, and just like knowing that they are in their own little like apartments around the world, and we were like free in the game. We were roaming in these like beautiful meadows, and we were building these structures, and we were experiencing like things. Like we went to a concert, into a Travis Scott concert online, and all the time I could hear their voices chaka 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 in my head. And I haven't looked at like gamers like the same since that experience, and just realizing that like there is a very different experience for young people, whether they are playing Among Us, whether they are playing Fortnite, whether they are hanging out on a Discord service, that has to do with them being born in a world where like connectedness is a given, and they don't always need a fancy computer with all of the same infrastructure that we are used to. Sometimes it's enough for them to just like have voice around them, and that can be a very intimate experience. So I'm really curious to see like what we can learn from games that we can take into the classrooms, and kind of like figure out those same kind of spaces that actually feel like spaces, because Zoom, it feels like a non-space. It feels like we're all hanging out in our own little bubbles here. But on Fortnite, I absolutely felt that I was actually somewhere with a group of
I've got to try it. Actually, my younger brother, it's a ritual. You know, he's not like really into it's not the game itself. It's the fact that you're going to meet your friends. You're going to have that, get together every night or whatever. And I think that's brilliant. I'm tempted to try it because, wouldn't it be wonderful? Wouldn't it be magical that for education that you have that sort of experience for a classroom, that you can actually take a class somewhere? Like
I was listening to this,
a different world, or into a historical setting, or into like the human body or whatever.
Hopefully that's a very kind of a vision of future of technology I would love to
by then I will have to learn how to use it first.
But maybe it's going to be an environment where you just like, you don't need to learn to use it. You just need to learn to inhabit it.
I think it's wonderful what you said, that and it's wonderful to know that in your country that it is a human right. Hopefully in developing countries such as Thailand and other countries, we're able to do that as well, to give that it would mean definitely more opportunities for rural areas. Now let's take a look at EdTech though. With the COVID-19, you've seen, I think, a lot of online channels where people can learn a lot about things, right? We've seen a lot of people learn how to make sourdough. A lot of people learn how to like bake and do whatever, right? So then comes the question, hey, a lot of people think, right? Like, oh, I just need Google. I just need YouTube to learn. Why do I need to go to school? Right. And I maybe go back to what you said earlier in our talk, and that is like, you've come to the realization that school is still needed for that community and network. But at the same time, do you think EdTech will play a bigger role?
I think, well, it goes down to like, a bigger idea of what education is about. Is it about transfer of knowledge, which is about like you learning the exact technique to do sourdough, or is it about like memorizing facts, or is it about passing exams or getting through standardized testing? And that is one way of looking at education, but I think I'm more from a constructivist sort of family, where the idea is that we create meaning together through experiences, and education is about preparing children for a future, and it's about kind of giving them these long perspective ideas, not only the specific skill per se, but also like community and ideas, and also like getting them to know about ideas that they wouldn't otherwise learn about. I think that is the one scary thing about online education, is that if we all get to pick our own interests alone, we will have a much more siloed world where people who are only interested in Elon Musk and Neuralink and space exploration can go very deep into that, but they will never be kind of, they will never learn about the Greek classics or the ideas of chemistry or so forth. And it's a balance, of course. I think if you go really broad in education, that's not a good thing. But the idea that like a good education is well versed, it's balanced, and it's about creating meaning together, not about transferring knowledge from one person to another. But then the more technical question is like, do we need schools anymore? I think schools have so much more to do than about the knowledge that is inside of them. So for many students, especially in the higher education, schools are about getting in and about getting out. So it's about selection, that you get selected into this school, and then it's about getting out. So it's about the certification that you've actually mastered this knowledge, and unbundling those ideas, like the knowledge part, the selection part, and the certification part. I think it's just going to create a lot more different kinds of businesses. And for like me, I would love nothing more than to see that someone from rural Thailand becomes like a multi-billion business in teaching something they know really well, whether it's in the agriculture or something else. And I hope that is kind of the promise that internet hasn't yet fulfilled, kind of the global GDP, or kind of the global infrastructure to create educational experiences from wherever you are in the world. And for a very long time, it's been only a very selected group of exclusive universities that have been able to offer that. And now these universities are in trouble because they are more and more realizing that the only thing that they can offer for the children is, or the students, is the certification, the fact that you went to Harvard or you went to MIT or Stanford. And I think it's a good thing that that we have resources on YouTube. We have these different EdTech startups that are kind of working on the knowledge part and also kind of the certification part. And yeah, it's just a very, very interesting time now to see, because for a long time it's been hard to kind of reach people. You needed to like be somewhere, and
so far away. It's the thing of, I think a lot of people in the new generation, especially, they're not just thinking of, from my generation, like, getting in the top university. I think it's a bigger dynamic world now that they can choose from. There are more options that choose from, and definitely
absolutely.
very exciting. Gosh, we I want to fit more stuff into our talk because we have limited time, but I think it's really interesting what you just mentioned there. But before we take a look at what we're going to have for 2021 with Techsauce Global Summit and your books in Thailand, I just want to ask you, what is the main lesson, do you think, that we've learned in the education system in 2020? And what do you think we will do? Okay, be more positive in 2021.
I think the main thing, hopefully, we will take away from this year is the idea that kind of, let me see, maybe the idea of making learning visible, because so many of the structures that we held as sort of sacred, almost like the idea that learning happens in a classroom and learning happens through a test, were shaken this year, and that there's a teacher in front of the class who kind of transfers the knowledge. They were shaken this year, and we kind of realized that learning can happen in so many different ways. If that's the kind of positive spin I can put on this, that it can learn, that learning can happen when you're talking with your grandparents, when you're like walking, like crawling on the mud bed in the forest, or when you're hanging out on Fortnite with your pals. And maybe that's the one thing I wish we keep from this pandemic year, is the ability to recognize learning when it happens, and sort of also give recognition to it. And then going forward, I do wish that we can return to in-person teaching quite soon. I think we have collectively realized that humans crave for one another's company, and we learn in small cohorts. We learn reciprocity. We learn this we learn so much that isn't written in the curriculum and in the syllabus through interacting with one another. But I do hope that we keep the kind of the broad ideas, the fact that I could take a cooking class from New York, or that I could hang out with a bunch of UK teachers on their bar quiz night on Zoom. So we keep that sense that we're all in this together, which is the COVID crisis hit every single country in the world pretty much. So that sense of camaraderie, and we keep sharing best practices, and we keep sharing ideas among different cultures.
Okay, well, we look forward to seeing you this year, hopefully, because actually Techsauce Global Summit is going to be happening in 2021. I'm speaking it into realization. We will have it, and as Dr. Linda says, there's nothing better than connecting with each other, and hopefully maybe you will be able to join us either online, yes, or real life. I want to tell the audience a little bit about your work as well. I mean, let's not forget, even though we're in Thailand, or if you're in other countries, where I believe you have translations of your series, your children's book series, Hello Ruby.
So Hello Ruby is kind of the book series I started 5 years ago, and it touches on these ideas of how do we make coding and computer science playful and imaginative, and take it out of the kind of abstract world of math and ideas into the sort of fingertip knowledge that small children have it. And it's a storybook with a little girl character. It's always a story, a narrative that kind of creates that memory for the children that, oh, there was this little girl, Ruby, and she was really good with machines. And then there's always activities and exercises that teach you how to think about machine learning or internet or networks or hardware of a computer through these kind of very craft-based activities. And the Thai version of the series came out last year, just a little bit after I had left the conference, and it's out by Nanami Books, and I believe it's available in bookstores. And the Ruby series has actually been translated into over 30 languages. So odds are your listeners will find it. And if you want to take a look at the activities we did during the lockdown, so these tiny videos and the craft activities, they are at helloruby.com/play, or helloruby.com also. So any teacher who wants to try them out, they are completely free of charge, and you can use them in classrooms anywhere. And I would love to hear or see what your listeners come up with, and send me examples of what the kids built or made.
Oh, definitely. Please go to that website. I think everybody wants to share. And thank you so much, Dr. Linda, for sharing with us your learning experience in 2020 and also your hopes for the future. I think I've gotten a lot. I think our listeners have gotten a lot. And I hope to see you soon in Thailand in the future. Thank you so much, Ka.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Techsauce, sparking innovative thoughts.